Okay, moving on to 3-4, which is finding percents. So any ratio can be written as a percent and vice versa. So remember that percents are always out of 100, right? Because percent means per 100, okay? So we have the ability to change any fraction into an equivalent percentage and then find the percentage of any number, okay? So the key ratio that you need to remember for this is over of equals the percent over 100. And you can use this setup for any finding percent problem, okay? You can also change all of that into math language, right? So is in math means equals, of means multiply. Those really help you in this, okay? And what, if something is what, that's usually your variable. You can use n, you can use x, okay, but that's your variable. Meaning we don't know what that is yet, okay? So knowing that when you have proportions set up, you can always cross multiply to find your answer, and this ratio needs to be equal to this ratio because you already know that from previous lessons. You can actually rewrite this equation as cross product. So is times 100, or 100 times is, equals your of times the percent, okay? So if we take this, now we can change this statement around depending on what we're looking for. So if you're looking and let me just go back and tell you too, this again is the part of the whole, right? So if I ask you 20 points of 40 on a test is what percent, you would be able to figure that out. 20 is the part, 40 is the whole, okay? So you can change that around depending on what you need to solve for. And you really don't even need to memorize all three of these. You just need to know how to play with this setup right here to get any of these. So if you're looking for the is, you're going to multiply the whole times the percent, the of amount times the percent, and divide it by 100. If you're looking for the percent, you're simply going to divide the is over of and multiply that by 100. If you're looking for the whole part, so 20 is 50% of what, you're going to have the of by itself, multiply the is amount times 100, and divide it by your percent. Okay, so I know that's going to seem a little confusing right now, but as we work through these, it won't. Okay, so for each of the situations below, simply plug in the values you know and solve for the one you don't. So what is 18% of 300? So let me show you two. Look at these three things that we have in any of these setups. We have an is, we have an of, and we have a percent. Another thing that you can do is actually put lines in and separate. What is, we don't know what our is. We do know what our percent is, and we know what our of is. So you can always start with this and fill in the blanks. So we always know the bottom right is going to be 100. What is, anytime you see what, that's going to be your variable. We don't know what that is. 18%, well, the percent goes right there. Percent's always out of 100, so we have the 100 down there. And my of is 300. Now, I want you to recognize that because you guys are really good at equivalent fractions at this point, you also can use your equivalent fractions. Since 100 and 300 have a relationship, it's pretty easy to multiply 100 by 3 to get 300. If you multiply 18 by 3, you would in fact get this amount, which would be 54. There's one way, okay? Or you could cross multiply. So you would have 18 times 300 equals 100 times x. If I'm using this up here, you can see that it's my of amount, my 300, times the percent, and now I'm just going to divide that 100 out. So 18 times 300 would be 5400 divided by 100, so it would again give me 54. Okay? We're going to do lots of practice on these, so just work through these with me for now. So let's go again. 30 is what percent of 150? For this one, let's actually change this into a mathematical sentence and see if we can figure this out. So remember that is means equal, right? What percent. We don't know what that percent is, but we know that of means multiply of 150. Okay? So we have, using this up here, we have this. We can figure that out. Otherwise, you can do your percent equals 100 times your is, which in this case is 30, divided by your of, which in this case is 150. Okay? So 3 times 1 is 3, and we have 1, 2, 3 zeros we need to add on to there, divided by 150. So 150 goes into 300 twice, and then we're going to add a 0 onto that. So it's 20%. In order to check that, I also want you to think about what 20% is as a fraction. So 20% as a fraction is 20 over 100, which can reduce to 1 over 5. If I take a fifth of 150, or divide 150 by 5, I also get 30. I want you to see if that's starting to click of how these are all related. Okay? All right, last one. 28 is 40% of what? I really do like separating the sentences like that. I think it makes it much easier. So we can go back to our is over of equals the percent over 100. So we have 28 is our is. Our 100 is always down here. We know our percent is 40. And of what? We don't know what that is. Let's use n this time just to be different. Okay? So cross products must be equal. So you have 2800 equals 40 times something. Okay? And this is the beginning of solving equations, which we actually aren't technically doing until next semester, but you really have been doing this all along. Okay? So if n is being multiplied by 40, the opposite of doing that would be dividing both sides by 40, because that really means 40 times something gives me 2800. So I can cross those out. 4 goes into 28 7 times, and I add the extra 0 on, and I get a 70. Okay? And again, I should be able to double check that a couple of ways. So 28 over 70, let's see what that reduces to. Well, I can divide those both by 7, and I get 4 over 10, and then I can cut those each in half, and I get 2 over 5. So 40 over 100 needs to reduce to the same fraction. So if I cut each of those in half, by 10, right, I would get 4 over 10, and again that reduces to 2 over 5. They must reduce to the same fraction, just like equivalent fractions always do. Okay? So I want you to try these 3 below, and then we will come back and check them together. Okay, so setting up the first one, should have had, you know your is, you don't know your percent, and you know your of. So you would have 35 over 140 equals the percent over 100. Now, you can also look vertically to see if they have any connection to each other. You probably wouldn't know that that has a connection to one another. So you could just go ahead and cross multiply, and you would have 3,500 divided by 140 equals the percent. You can cut those off, and you should end up with 25%. If I remember what 25% is equivalent to for a fraction, that's equivalent to 1/4. So I can check this fraction, 35 over 140, and decide if that is equivalent to 1/4. So if I divide each of those by 7, because I know they've each got a relationship to that, 5 over 20, and I can cut those each by 5, and I would get 1 over 4. So I know that that answer is correct. Okay, number 2, what is 30% of 200? So what is 30% of 200? So if we want to go back and use this up here, is equals our of amount times the percent divided by 100. So is equals our of amount, which in this case is 200, times our percentage, which is 30, divided by 100. The percent is being divided by 100 because remember that if we change this into a decimal, it would be 0.3. So I'm really just converting that right there. Now, this is kind of nice because 100 goes into 200 pretty evenly. So now you just do 2 times 30, and the math should be 60. Again, let's double check that and make sure that that's true. And if we put that, so now we know that our is 60, and that is 200, and we know that it needs to equal 30%. We can double check that that does. And 200 divided by 2 is 100, so that's okay. And 60 divided by 2 is 30, so that's okay. So 60 is a good answer. Okay, last one. 20 is 5% of what? So 20 equals, this means is means equals, 5%. I'm actually going to write that as a fraction. So 5% would be 500 times something that we don't know, right? So remember that if I multiply by the reciprocal of this, it's going to get rid of it, and I want x to be by itself. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 100 over 5. So those are all going to cancel out on this side, and all I end up with is x. 100 divided by 5 is 20, which is convenient. So now I can just multiply 20 times 20. 2 times 2 is 4. I'm going to add on those 2 zeros, so I should get 400. Remember that if it's only 20% is 5% of something. 5 is pretty small portion of something. So that portion to be bigger, let's double check again that that really does come out to 5%. So I can divide those by 10. I get 2 over 40, and then I can cut those in half by 2, and I get 1 over 20. And if I wanted to change that back into a percent, so I know that it's coming out to 5%, I multiply each by 5, and 1 times 5 is 5. So that checks out. Okay, we're going to do lots of practice with this, but we're on a good start. Thanks.